Hey everyone, man it's been a while since I made a video, a couple months in fact, and I figure a good way to get back into this would be to revisit our old friend, Gligar13Vids. Today, Gligar is going to be pissing off a lot of people by talking about how much Legend of Zelda The Ocarina of Time is a terrible game. And he's also going to be lying to his audience at one point. I'm going to be pointing out exactly when that is, but enough rambling out of me. Let's get started, shall we?
Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be reviewing another lame-ish game for the Nintendo 64.
And by that, I mean I'm going to be bitching about another game that I've barely ever played, just so people on the internet will give me attention, like this jackass who's making fun of this video and feeding directly into exactly what I want. Thanks, Slightly Livid Gaming. You've given me everything I've asked for. Dumbass.
The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Now, basically, from what I know when this game came out,
When I was 2 years old.
it was heralded as the best game ever. This was in 1998.
And I'm going to be unfairly judging it by modern standards.
It's been released 5 times. On the N64, twice on the GameCube, Virtual Console, and of course the 3DS version. It's still the same game, but one of the GameCube versions had additional levels. It doesn't matter though, because this game is still bad.
Well, bad according to Gligar13 and his infinite knowledge of video game critique.
So, how bad is this game?
Not at all. In fact, it's really, really good.
Now, the N64 wasn't that great of a system.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
It came out in 1996.
Dude, can you back away from the microphone? The feedback is really starting to get annoying.
It sounds terrible, and it's really distracting and annoying. Unless that's what you're going for, which I wouldn't be surprised.
After the PS1, and yet managed to have crappier graphics.
Because that's all that really matters.
It also didn't last as long. The graphics of N64 games are very distinct, involving models that look like they came straight out of Final Fantasy VII, low textures, all those blurry-ass textures, and, of course, frame rates that are extremely low.
I'm willing to admit that maybe it's because I grew up with it, but I never really had any problem with the frame rates. And I don't think anyone else has either. Maybe it's just the emulator you're using.
It also used cartridges. Why cartridges?
So Nintendo wouldn't have to figure out how to make games on an entirely new technology, and also because the cartridges had a number of advantages over CDs. I mean, yes, CDs could hold more data, but a cartridge didn't have the load times that PS1 and Sega Saturn games had. And those load times were pretty horrible.
Because it's Nintendo, and Nintendo loved to stay in the past. This would be a tradition that would carry on of Nintendo liking to stick in the past. From the GameCube, with its mini discs and lack of online, to the Wii, and of course, not only that console's horrible online, but the fact that the Wii was merely an overclocked GameCube.
Yeah, you're right about that. The Wii was basically just a GameCube on steroids with motion controls. Aren't we supposed to be reviewing Ocarina of Time and not hardware that Nintendo put out afterwards?
And from the looks of it, it looks to continue with the Wii U. But now let's talk about the actual game.
Oh god, finally!
The game came out in 1998, the same year Half-Life 1 and many other games did. This should give you a good indication of what the graphics were like at the time.
So what? Graphics from 1998 look old. What's your point?
Now keep in mind, the Dreamcast was going to come out a year later and outdo this game, even though the Dreamcast's graphics weren't that great.
Well, when you judge it by the standards of today, they aren't, but, when you judge them by the standards of their own time, they were pretty okay. Really, what you're doing is very similar to if you were to say Toy Story, the original Toy Story looks like crap when you compare it to Avatar. Of course it does. It was made then, and technology has made great leaps forward since. It's sort of an unfair comparison. And really, when you really think about it, Toy Story was a far, far, far better movie than Avatar, despite the fact that Avatar was prettier.
So let's start off with the gameplay.
Or rather, let's start off by watching the opening title screen, which isn't really the gameplay, but whatever.
So the first thing you'll notice when you start the game, everything is so low resolution.
It would be. It's a cartridge game from 1998.
And the frame rate sucks balls too. Just look at that amazing blurry texture.
Really? Because it looks fine to me.
And of course that frame rate, which is about 15 FPS. And drops a whole lot.
Which was sort of a problem with cartridge games. You know, you had too much stuff on screen and the frame rate drops a little bit. It was the same with a lot of disc-based games as well. It's not really that huge of a problem unless it actually starts affecting the gameplay and making the game harder to play because of it. And it really doesn't with Ocarina of Time at all. So your argument here isn't really all that valid.
But like I said, the N64 graphics are very bland. Compared to the PS1, which actually had textures and stuff.
That often looked like crap. I mean, look, I love my PlayStation 1 games, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times the textures on PS1 games looked horrible.
The N64 feels crappy. So you start the game, and you get to see the world's deepest plot ever.
Okay, Miyamoto games were never really all that heavy on plot. He wanted his games to have the most unobtrusive plots you can find so that you could just get into the game and start playing and enjoying it without having like a heavy narrative getting in the way. So of course the plot's not going to be all that great. It's Miyamoto. That wasn't his point. That wasn't what he was going for.
Save fucking Zelda. So basically you start off where Link is some little kid in some stupid village which nobody cares about.
Except for, you know, what could be one of the most obsessive video game fan bases ever, who have actually have a number of essays that border on the length of doctoral dissertations or whatever about the timeline of the Legend of Zelda games.
And then basically you walk around whacking monsters, collecting items.
Welcome to Nintendo, Gligar.
Another common theme on N64 games is they a lot of times happen to be collectathons. Donkey Kong 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Super Mario 64. You'll notice this a lot.
Hey, I don't know about you guys, but right now I want to play me some Banjo and Kazooie.
Because the N64 got all the crappy platformers.
You know, Gligar, I keep forgetting that you have terrible taste. I'm sorry.
While the PS1, well, that got the good games.
Like Bubsy 3D. Alright, look, I know that was a cheap shot, but, you know, as much as I love the PS1, I have to say that the Nintendo 64 generally had better platformers. It's just something Nintendo generally did better than their competition.
So anyways, like I said, the graphics are crappy. And yeah.
An excellent point there, Gligar. And yeah. That's something you say that can completely shut down any argument. And yeah. Checkmate. And yeah.
The camera, well, there's not really much of a camera. You have to control the camera with the amazing auto lock-on system where you hit the Z button and it locks on suddenly.
Which was actually a really good system. I mean, it was very simple, easy to use. There was no confusion there. It just worked, you know? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm wrong, because I'm not Gligar13. And yeah.
And of course, there's Force tutorials. You've got Navi. Not just Navi, but the text moves slow, like,
Hey, listen! Gligar actually makes a pretty good point here. I gotta give him that. The tutorials do take a long time. The text did scroll very slowly. I mean, that was kind of annoying. Now, Watch as he completely loses any valid point he just made.
You think there'd be voice acting? No, no, no. The N64 sucked and most games didn't have voice acting.
Because voice acting is what makes a game good. I mean, look at Final Fantasy X. That game had amazing voice acting, and it's a really good game. For the record, I really don't like Final Fantasy X at all. No, I actually don't think that good video game voice acting was invented until like 2002 or so. But I would also like to point out that on a cartridge-based game, you usually couldn't fit the amount of data that would be required to have a fully voiced dialogue throughout the entire game, especially for a game with as much dialogue as Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time.
So you have to mash the A button, but you can't speed through what they're saying. You have to suffer this all so slowly. Seriously. So when you start the game...
Holy crap! Actual gameplay footage! I want to point out right now that at this point in his video, we are 4 minutes and 35 seconds in. About halfway through, and he finally decides to put in gameplay footage in his game review. That is kind of amazing.
The frame rate sucks. Yes. This is the actual frame rate. This isn't some laggy computer. No, this is on the real hardware.
Liar! That is not on the original hardware, and I can actually prove that. You see, it showed at the start of the video, when he was at the title screen, when he starts the game, it doesn't go to the choose a save file screen. It goes directly into the opening cutscene. There are two possibilities here. One, he has a copy of Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time that didn't have any save files on it, which would mean, more than likely, that he got a copy of it that was complete in the box, sealed, still in the shrink wrap. That costs way more money than anyone who just wants to play the game would be willing to invest, especially if they're just buying it so they can review it and throw a bitch fit about how bad it is to get attention. Now, the other possibility here, possibility number 2, is that Gligar is using an emulator. Whether that be some Nintendo 64 emulator or the Wii Virtual Console is sort of irrelevant, because he's saying that he's using the actual original hardware, and he isn't. Because I might be wrong here, and correct me if I am, if you were to play Ocarina of Time on the Nintendo Wii or Wii U via Virtual Console, it wouldn't have the Nintendo 64 buttons up there on the display of what buttons to press. It would have the Wii buttons on there. He's using a computer emulator. Not that there's anything wrong with using a computer emulator. That's perfectly fine. I do it myself fairly often. But the fact is, he just said that he's using the real hardware. And I just proved to you that more than likely, almost certainly, he is not using the original hardware. Gligar, you are a liar.
This is the actual frame rate. The frame rate sucks balls.
Let me explain why that is to you, Gligar. Because every Nintendo 64 emulator I've ever used has been a piece of crap. That's your problem.
And not only that, but like I said, the graphics are all blurry because this is an N64 game, and the N64 blows.
Well, you know, the best reviewers do repeat themselves ad nauseum.
But even by N64 standards, these aren't that impressive. I mean, seriously? Just look at all that blurry-ass puke. That's the actual graphics.
No, those are the actual graphics when you record them on an imperfect emulation via something like, I don't know, Hypercam or Cam Studio, and you don't turn the video quality up to the point where you can actually get the footage to look good.
And, yeah, basically you walk around collecting rupees and shit. It's not fun at all. And then you get a sword, and then you walk around with a little bitch-ass sword going. Yeah, that's seriously what the gameplay is. The gameplay is very repetitive, and it's just boring and all drawn out.
Huh, sounds familiar. You know, I know why that sounds familiar. Because that's what you are.
Not fun at all. And trust me, after this game, every Zelda game has been the exact same since.
Yes, most have been very similar, but I'd like to point out that Minish Cap, Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks. Now, Link Between Worlds wasn't released by the time that Gligar made this video, so I'm going to let that one slide. But I'm not going to let those others slide, because he said that every Zelda game since Ocarina has been exactly like Ocarina.
Because, you know, it's Nintendo, and they're the only company that can get away with, in the gaming community, milk and milk.
Milk and Milk. Huh, that sounds like a really lame platforming duo from the 16-bit era that no one wants to remember.
And it doesn't help the animations are awful. I mean, come on. Not only is the whole thing slow, but you'll see crap like this. What the heck is that kid doing?
Well, he's trying to pick up that rock. But everyone, you know that he's just going to make a joke about how it looks like the kid is humping the rock, because we've all been making those jokes since, like, at least Link to the Past, right? I mean, it's a joke that was funny when you were 10 years old, and then stopped being funny when you were 11.
Is he having sex with the rock? What the fuck?
Gligar, does your mother know you're saying naughty words on the internet? For shame.
He's like, what is he doing? He's like, it's like he's pushing in. I'm not this is really in the game. This isn't a mod. This is the actual stuff.
Okay, Gligar, the joke wasn't funny to begin with. Now drop the joke and move on to your actual quote-unquote critique of the game.
What the hell? And what the heck is the kid there doing? Is he masturbating in the grass?
It's still not funny, Gligar.
Just no.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly, kid.
Let me mention one more thing. The music. The music is kind of meh-ish. I mean, it's just like elevator music, bland and forgettable.
You brought this up in your Mega Man X review, and I have to ask you again, do you know what elevator music sounds like? Because this doesn't sound like the smooth jazz you hear on an elevator in your doctor's office.
Like many N64 games?
Right, because no Nintendo 64 game ever had a good soundtrack.
All in all, final verdict, don't buy this game. Not on the N64, not on the Wii, not on the 3DS, not on the 3 million releases. Don't buy this game, save your money. I bought this game for $3 at the thrift store earlier, a few years ago. It was a ripoff.
Notice how he immediately changes his story from earlier to 3 years ago? Yeah, that leads me to believe that he didn't in fact buy this game at a thrift store, either earlier or a few years ago.
Don't buy it, save your money. Thanks for watching, subscribe for more.
No.